Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. In Flint, Michigan, between 6,000 and 12,000 children have been exposed to lead poisoning. In congressional hearings on March 17th, Republicans blamed Democrats and Democrats blamed Republicans. It was astonishing. But the real villain was something utterly different. It was not Democratic, it was not Republican. It was governmental inaction. Government not doing what it's here to do. And the real villain was a failure to invest in infrastructure. In the congressional hearings, Democrats blamed Michigan Governor Rick Snyder. That made total sense to me. For one thing, I'm a Democrat and I'm prejudiced. But Rick Snyder had taken over governing Flint. He'd taken over a Republican, had taken over a Democratic town in a kind of coup. And he had run that town through a series of 4 emergency managers. Not managers accountable to the public, not democratically elected managers, managers of a Democratic city who answered to a Republican governor. That's a takeover. But when Republicans blamed the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Gina McCarthy, I was aghast. The Republicans have been doing everything in their power to cripple the EPA. How could they possibly criticize the EPA for inaction when they are trying to destroy it? Meanwhile, Governor Snyder has done something unheard of in politics, and this I admire, and you should too. He's apologized, and he has sent $28 million in aid providing bottled water and filters to the people of Flint, Michigan. Now look, by having opposing points of view on an issue like Flint, Michigan, we explore far more facets of a problem than we would if we all agreed to. So the two-party system, in theory, is extremely useful. But underneath the Flint water crisis, there is a real villain. It's a national total of between $3 and $7 trillion worth of deferred infrastructure investment. That's a burden we have shifted to our children and grandchildren in the name of a lie. Well, lie number 1, 2 lies. That by deferring this investment, we are preventing putting a burden on our children and grandchildren. The precise opposite of the truth. And lie number 2, if we starve the government of funds, we will all miraculously grow wealthy. In the 35 years since Ronald Reagan became frontman for this formula, he was backed by major corporate interests. They paid for, even his ranch in California was paid for by the founder of MCA, a major corporation. He was a man on the take. And of course, he was a spokesman for GE for 35 years. But in the 35 years since Ronald Reagan became frontman for this formula that crippled government and we'll all get rich, American wages have stagnated. The miracle of wealth has not materialized. Now, if you're on the Republican side of things, you can say, but that's because you Democrats managed to run a big government operation, even in spite of us. Well, think about this. George Bush Jr. was the one who took us from a balance of payments, from zero debt, zero new debt, to the biggest debt in the history of this earth, primarily by getting us involved in an ill-advised war, the war in Iraq. But that's a subject for another time. Who's selling us this phony formula that if we cut down government, if we get rid of it completely, that we'll all get rich? It's a bunch that will spend almost $1 billion to buy the current presidential election. It's a group that America is rebelling against. Yes, this election represents a rebellion. It's a rebellion against the billionaires who've been manipulating our government. The rebellion has given us the runaway success of 2 impossible candidates. Donald Trump, who's a billionaire, fighting against, allegedly, against billionaires, and Bernie Sanders, whose support comes from the most astonishing upsurge of public sentiment that I can remember seeing in all of my decades in politics. Now, who are the billionaires trying to tell you that removing government is going to make you rich? Well, it's led by the Koch family and their friends, the group that even conservative founding father William F. Buckley called, are you ready for this, anarcho-totalitarians. Yes, William F. Buckley, the founding father of modern conservatism, called this bunch of billionaires anarchists and totalitarians. As Jane Mayer's Dark Money puts it, that's a book, the billionaire gang includes, and I'm going to read this to you, Richard Mellon Scaife, an heir to the Mellon banking and Gulf oil fortunes. Richard Mellon Scaife poured money in the 1990s into defaming Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. It includes Harry and Linda Bradley, Midwesterners enriched by defense contracts. They make their money off of the government they are opposing. John M. Olin, a chemical and munitions company titan, and munitions industries make their money off the government these guys are opposing. The Coors Brewing family of Colorado, where would they be without a constant supply of fresh water and electricity, infrastructure, not to mention the roads to carry their beer and the railroads to carry their beer, infrastructure. And the Davos family of Michigan, founders of the Amway marketing empire, who would also be nowhere without telephones, roadways, and infrastructure. The only man confronting this catastrophe of infrastructure blindness is, of all people, Bernie Sanders. He wants to create 1 million jobs by upgrading our infrastructure, a $3 to $7 trillion process we absolutely must go through, one way or the other. But there's a secret that both the Democrats and Republicans are missing. It's in my book, The Genius of the Beast, a radical revision of capitalism. The Western system and the American system work through a balance of 3 elements: government, private industry, and the protest industry. Get that system out of balance. Allow one to prevail over the others, private industry, to the detriment of government and the protest industry. Let the protest industry get out of hand and take over the whole ball of wax, and you are looking at catastrophe. Even one of the most successful super conservatives of all time, and we've done a podcast or YouTube on this, Otto von Bismarck in Germany in the 1880s knew this. He established the equivalent of Social Security and workman's comp in Germany 135 years ago. Why? To make Germany's industries the biggest, fastest growing industries on the face of the planet. And guess what? It worked. He got things in balance. And where did he get the idea of establishing an equivalent of workman's comp and Social Security? From his protest industry, from the socialists. Even this arch-conservative knew how to keep those 3 elements, government, industry, and the protest business, in balance. For private industry to flourish, for you and me to flourish, and to prevent the next Flint, Michigan, we need a massive injection of infrastructure spending. And that's a job only government can handle. Without infrastructure, even folks like the Kochs are forced to stop dead in their tracks. Their money-making enterprises grind to a halt without roads, electricity, and water. The bottom line is this: without infrastructure, we will be doomed to a future of Flint, Michigans. Do not let this happen. Stop the stalemate in government. Start building new plumbing infrastructures for our cities, new roadways, new railways, including bullet trains that can outdo the Chinese and the Japanese. Don't just bring us up to the level of the late 20th century. Bring us up to the level of the early 22nd century. This is Howard the Humongous speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make, or want to know why? Ask how. And now for that seditious, slimy, sneaky, I can't even find out which hand I have to do it with. Where is it? Little off button. I think I've found it.